I'm back. And um yeah, doing okay. Weather's kind of cloudy and cold, but I think we're ready to go. Moving on to the next chapters, chapter 7. Oh, I also wanted to apologize. Sorry my quality is absolute garbage. That's just what the internet be like in a small mountain town. So thanks for putting up with that. Anyway, here we go. Chapter 7. While Dr. Helen consulted with Professor Mumblebee, Piper stood helplessly at the front of the science laboratory. Like everything else Piper had seen that day, the room was equipped with only the finest and most innovative technology. Bunsen burners, glass beakers, gleaming silver metal instruments, and shining white plastic containers were readily available at each student's very own learning station, which had been constructed to meet their particular academic needs. Currently, the learning stations were occupied by science projects, all of which were in varying degrees of completion. Piper counted 11 children in all, ranging in age from about 5 to 14 years old. They shared an acute curiosity about their newest class member, and each pair of eyes was fixed intently upon Piper with a merciless stare. "Not much to look at, is she?" Smitty whispered to Kimber. Kimber punched him in the arm. She was a very strong girl. "Oomph," Smitty wheezed. A whispering firestorm was sweeping through the rank and file as they unabashedly dissected Piper, who had been left before them like a sacrificial offering. "What's her thing?" Lily Yakimoto wanted to know. Job one with a new student, besides intimidating them or generally ignoring them, was to identify their particular talent. Once uncovered, that talent would determine their place in the class pecking order. Not every ability seemed to have a purpose. Thus, the more interesting, unusual, or powerful the gift, the higher the ranking. Figuring out where Piper stood was potentially going to affect each of their standing, and so it was of immediate interest. "She don't have the looks of a genius. Maybe she's a fire starter. Betcha she's another thought thrower. It's called being psychic, stupid." "She's psychic? Gosh, not another one. We just got rid of Beth." $10 says she'll break. She looks like a crier," Smitty judged. It wasn't uncommon for kids to crack up when they first arrived. That, what with being away from home for the first time and missing parents and the like. The class had turned this homesickness ritual into a game that hinged on the ability to accurately predict the breakdown's exact timing. Betting often topped $50. Competition was fierce and dirty tactics the norm. Opponents would egg a new kid on by reminding them how much their parents missed them, or perhaps how much a loving pet might die before their return home, all of which was said in a calculated effort to push them over the brink at the appropriate moment and thus win the bet. The bigger and more violent the breakdown, the better. "Those tears will be flowing for lights out." Smitty squished his face up in mock sobs. "I want my mommy. I want to go home." Sniff, sniff. "She's no crier," Violet shyly ventured. "Shut it, Violet, unless you've got the dough to back it up." Like a chihuahua who fancied himself a pit bull, Smitty was a pimply geek who had somehow mistakenly developed the notion that he was actually a muscle-bound tough guy. "I'll see your 10, Smitty." Kimber stepped up to the plate with her fiery red hair and temper to match. She was the short girl. She was the sort of girl who embraced challenges, conflicts, and anything that involved getting the best of Smitty. "Like taking candy from a baby." Smitty smacked his lips. "Better kiss that money bye-bye, Sparky." Sparky was Smitty's pet name for Kimber because A, he knew she hated it, and B, Kimber's personality was best described as shocking. Ahem. Professor Mumblebee cleared his throat loudly, interrupting the roar of quiet chattering. Beg my pardon on this accent. "This is Piper McCloud. She will be joining us from now on." Professor Mumblebee was 70 years old, as if he was a day. His German accent was so thick it was often unintelligible, and while he should have retired years and years before, he proved to be the only teacher capable of keeping control of completely uncontrollable children, which made him utterly irreplaceable. "You will make Piper feel welcome," Professor Mumblebee stated flatly. Despite Professor Mumblebee's decree, Piper could see absolutely nothing welcoming in the expressions of her new classmates. In fact, they appeared to be regarding her with a strong mixture of suspicion, dislike, and mischievousness. I'm right pleased to meet you all, Piper smiled, hoping to win them over. I'll leave you to settle in now, Piper. Dr. Hellion quietly brushed past her on the way to the door. No, Piper whispered urgently. Don't go. Not to worry. I've explained your situation to Professor Mumblebee. He understands that you lack classroom experience, and he'll help you out. Dr. Hellion placed a hand on Piper's shoulder comfortingly. Just relax, and you'll have fun. I'm excited for you. But Piper wanted to grab hold of Dr. Hellion and never let her go. My door is always open for you, Piper. Dr. Hellion smiled and then slipped away, leaving Piper alone with them. The class is presenting their initial work on science projects. Miss McLeod, I'll schedule a meeting this week to decide on your project, yeah? Professor Mumblebee waited for Piper to respond, and Piper stiffly nodded. In the meantime, you will sit with Miss Bella Lovely, and she will help you along the way. And she will help you follow along. Professor Mumblebee nodded to a petite girl with long golden hair who immediately pulled an empty chair up next to her. Piper tentatively settled into the offered seat next to Bella, thankful to be released from the center stage spotlight at the front of the room. Hi! Bella smiled, and her smile betrayed the joyous, smiling nature of a very bright soul. Bella was endowed with an unrelentingly sunny and effervescent disposition, which was in no small part due to the fact that her mother was a painter, her father was a sculptor, and she had grown up in an organic, communal farm in the San Francisco Bay Area, where she was daily pummeled with massive amounts of unconditional love. This had left Bella without a mean bone in her body and enough positive pos- positivism to single-handedly reverse global warming. This is Princess Madrigal. Bella presented Piper to her plant that was blooming on the desk in front of them. She's my science experiment, and I created her myself. Want to smell? Bella had cross-pollinated a rose with a daffodil, a lilac, and an orchid. By the byproduct of these unlikely parents was the most exquisite-looking and smelling plant that anyone had ever seen, and which, under Bella's loving attention, was daily becoming even more remarkable. This yellow blossom is for hope, and that red one is for faith and devotion. But look over here. Bella pointed excitedly to the other side of her plant. This bud is just about to open, and it's going to be a glorious pink, see? Piper had never much taken to flowers, but there was something really special about this one. Besides which, it was clear to Piper that she and Bella were sure to be fast friends. Any girl with such a keen appreciation for beauty was someone Piper could see eye to eye with. Holy cow, she smells like paradise! Piper wasn't even close to exaggerating. And looks like heaven! That pink bud will set off those purple bits. Exactly what I was thinking! Bella sparkled boy by happy by the praise and thrilled that someone appreciated her flower as much as she did. She smiled at Piper, and Piper smiled back, each girl excited by the other. Class, we will now begin your science presentations. A groan emerged from several throats, but was promptly silenced by one look from Professor Mumblebee. Bring your project to the front of the room and tell the class what progress you have made with it. As there were no volunteers, Professor Mumblebee quickly selected candidates and tolerated no excuses or resistance. Piper leaned forward in her seat, excited to be part of her first real class. First, we will hear from Mr. Mustafa and Mr. Mustafa. Professor Mumblebee had the habit of addressing all of his students in a formal way. Ahmed and Naylan Mustafa, identical twins, presented a miniature but fully functional weather station. On the top of it was a rotating steel disc. This is called a Naylan, or possibly Ahmed said, pointing to the disc, sensor, and it collects Ahmed, or maybe Naylan, continued spinning the disc. Atmospheric data and, ditto, reports it to these, ditto again, sensors that their presentation went on in this manner, and Piper was more riveted by the way the two boys completed each other's sentences than the content of their explanation. The fact of the matter was that in all of their 12 years, neither Naylan or Ahmed had ever completed an entire sentence independent of the other. They were never apart. No one could tell them apart, and they never revealed who was who. After a while, people started thinking of them as one person, which suited Naylan and Ahmed just fine. As their presentation continued, Piper became aware of loud thunder. Not long after, a thick fog began to gather in the classroom, and it got so that Piper could hardly see her own hand. That will do, Mr. Mustafa and Mustafa. Professor Mumblebee cut their presentation short and asked them to sit down. Curiously enough, once the boys were seated, the thunder ceased and the fog quickly dissipated. Jasper, a small boy as thin as a whisper and the youngest in the entire class, was called up next. As soon as he came to the front of the room, he began to whimper uncontrollably and cry so that he couldn't get a single word out. Professor Mumblebee finally had to ask him to sit down. Then Myrtle Grabtrash, a tall, lanky girl with dirty brown hair, zipped to the front of the classroom so quickly and spoke so fast that she was back in her seat before anyone realized that she had even started. As far as Piper could tell, her project was about the velocity of light. Mr. Harrington, you will be next. The commanding presence of Conrad Harrington III swaggered to the front of the class. He had blonde hair, perfectly even features, and was by all standards handsome, a fact that no one ever actually noticed because his face was always contorted into the sourest expression. His father was a very important senator, and his mother was a British diplomat with a lineage that rivaled the royal family. They had passed on to their only son what Conrad's aunts called good breeding, and promptly left him to his own devices. The general feeling between his parents was that good breeding alone was more than enough parenting, and Conrad couldn't possibly expect or need anything else from them. As they later learned, that was not the case. When Conrad arrived at the facility, he was 7, and after 4 years he had become the longest resident. For those not good at math, that made Conrad 11 years old. He also had the most acute and extraordinary ability ever recorded, which placed him uncontestedly as the alpha kid in the class. Without Conrad's permission, the other kids wouldn't dare breathe, let alone think. My project is on time travel, Conrad announced, causing Piper to sit forward in her seat with anticipation. This will be mighty interesting, Piper thought to herself. Conrad approached the dry erase board and began writing out a very long, very involved, and completely confusing formula. To fully appreciate the complexity of time travel, the time-space continuum must be further broken down by. Conrad spoke quickly, and his hand moved even faster. By the time that he was finished, every single board in the entire room was covered with his numbers. Therefore, time, space, and matter intersect on the probability axis here, which creates the opportunity to slow time and possibly, under the right conditions, reverse it. He returned back to the class with a flourish. Absolutely no one reacted or moved. Piper, along with the others, was completely confused, and by the looks of it, Professor Mumblebee was no more enlightened. An unmistakable look of disappointment moved across Conrad's face, and his sour expression intensified. What is this, Mr. Harrington? Professor Mumblebee barked. We agreed your project was to be on effects of polarized magnets, no? Conrad threw down his marker on the floor so hard that it cracked open. Using his foot, he stamped on it. And I told you that I wasn't going to do that. I say you will. Professor Mumblebee was not one to be bullied. Like pearls to swine, Conrad mumbled so quietly that only Piper was able to hear it. What is that you say, Mr. Harrington? This, Conrad fiercely said, pointing at his many numbers and formulas, proves time travel. It proves it. And you want me to do a project on magnets? Conrad looked like he was on the verge of throwing something. Professor Mumblebee got to his feet and fixed Conrad with a stare that could turn water to stone. Mr. Harrington, would you care to speak of this to Dr. Hellion? Is that what you want? It looked like Conrad was going to do something radical, but at the critical moment he took a deep breath and unclenched his fists. No. A wise decision, Mr. Harrington, and I expect your project on magnetism next week, then. Yes, Mr. Mumblebee. Conrad sat down in such a way as to suggest calmness, but it was clear to Piper he was on the verge of exploding. Princess Madrigal has grown 2 inches since last week, Bella happily reported to the class after Professor Mumblebee called upon her. Bella went on to explain her cross-pollination process, while Conrad silently seethed, getting madder and meaner by the second. At that moment, he was meaner and madder than he'd ever been, but mainly at himself, which is the worst kind of mean and mad to be. Because the only thing to do about it is to take it out on someone else, which is when Conrad's attention settled on the perfect target, Bella. Bella's science project had been a massive success. Conrad could not quite frankly have cared less about her stupid flower. Horticultural science to him was for lesser or feeble minds, and certainly a waste of time and energy. But that wasn't the point. The point was that he hated the plant so much, and in a way that he couldn't explain, he needed to see it dead, and for Bella to suffer and the loss of it. It would serve Bella and her sickeningly loving family right, Conrad reasoned. You could conjure a snapshot of Bella's daily home life in his mind. I love you, Bella. You are the perfect daughter and wonderful beyond measure. That was what Bella's sickening mother might say while covering her in kisses. But I love you more, Mother. This is how Bella would probably respond. And I love all of you unconditionally. Group hug. And then we'll eat some yummy tofu, Bella's stupid father would say and throw his arms wide open. It was enough to make Conrad vomit, which was why he was going to lop off the head of her stupid, ugly flower and watch it roll across the classroom floor. Out of the corner of her eye, Piper caught sight of Conrad, carefully folding a piece of paper and then moments later lifting a paper airplane into the air. It was, of course, no common paper airplane. Having been designed by Conrad, it was more like a fighter jet. Piper watched as Conrad quietly but quickly took aim and launched it with great precision across the classroom. And this is what happened. The plane zipped past Smitty and surprised him. He jumped backward to avoid being hit by it and ended up knocking into Kimber. Startled, Kimber grabbed hold of Smitty and delivered 10,000 volts of electricity into his arm. Yow! Smitty yowled with enough force to shatter a person's eardrum, smoke rising from the singed hairs on his arm. Startled, Professor Mumblebee dropped the book he was holding right on Violet's head. Thwack! Piper stared in disbelief as Violet shrank to half of her normal size. Because of her reduced state, so to speak, the fighter jet passed easily over Violet's head. Next, it veered past Daisy, course corrected on Myrtle's earlobe, and set a target straight for Ahmed and Nayland Mustafa. As the jet approached the weather station, both Nayland and Ahmed reached out to snatch the plane from the air because they both lunged forward. At exactly the same time, and in precisely the same way, they collided in midair and sent their science project flying. Boom! The weather station hit the floor, and the spinning disc on the tower snapped free, ricocheting through the air at a frightening speed. It made a menacing swooshing sound. Meanwhile, the paper jet was running out of steam and was just about to hit the floor when the airstream from the vent propelled it into one last mission, straight at Piper. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. All eyes were on the dangerously whirling metal disc, careening about the classroom. The children didn't have to wait long before its ultimate target was announced. Swoosh, swoosh, right at Bella's Princess Madrigal. Bella's eyes went wide. She reached for her darling creation. Swoosh, swoosh, thwack! In slow motion, the metal bit into the green stem, and the brilliant, bright, hopeful flower was guillotined from its stem and tumbled through the air. Before Bella's eyes, Princess Madrigal fell to the floor, scattering petals where she lay. A terrible silence followed. Piper gasped, her hand coming to cover her mouth in horror as the paper airplane landed almost unnoticed on the desk before her. Bella fell to her knees, cradling her precious blossoms. No one spoke. Connor drank in the sight of Bella, prone over her now dying flower like a vampire lapping at an exposed artery. The grief, the sadness that Bella was experiencing filled him and stifled the terrible meanness and madness that had all but totally consumed him. He breathed a sigh of relief as the tension ebbed from his body just as it seemed to descend on Bella. Miss Lovely, are you all right? Professor Mumblebee came to Bella's side. Miss Lovely? Bella wasn't moving, just holding and looking at her flower. Professor Mumblebee was not exactly the most sensitive of men, but even a stone would have felt sympathy for Bella under such circumstances. Miss Bella? Bella, are you all right? Finally, Bella spoke, her voice trembling. Professor Mumblebee? Yes? I was just thinking that my flower is still so beautiful. Maybe if I put it in water it would still bloom, and perhaps it is a good thing that this happened, because now I'll know how long it will stay fresh when I grow on other plants. Like a phoenix rising from the ashes, Bella rose to her feet, holding up the flower. After all, a bouquet of flowers is probably the happiest and nicest thing ever, right? It makes someone smile. As always, Bella could find the silver lining in a dirty paper sack. She blinked away the tears that had been welling in her eyes, and her face returned to its normal cheerful configuration. Actually, I'd like to give this one to Dr. Hellion, so that she can enjoy it. Like all of the girls, Bella idolized Letitia Hellion. I'm sure Dr. Helene will appreciate this, Miss Lovely. Piper smiled broadly for her new friend, and relief spread through the other watching faces, except for one. Conrad couldn't believe his ears. Bella was happy? Happy? Was she crazy? What was wrong with her? The temporary relief he was beginning to feel was instantly replaced with double the meanness and madness that he had before. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Conrad meant business this time. Professor Mumblebee, I can help Bella to Dr. Helene's office, Conrad offered innocently. How nice of you, Conrad. Very well, you may both go. Conrad jumped to his feet and suddenly jostled Bella and her stupid plant from the room. In the course of their travels, he would see to it that Bella got the message once and for all. This time there would be no mistakes. As the children righted their chairs and took their seats, Piper's attention fell on the paper airplane in front of her. Reaching for it, the paper instantly unraveled to reveal a message inscribed within. It read, "Watch your back, new girl, you're next." Piper's eyes widened with alarm as the bell sounded for a meal break. End of chapter 7. Piper was pointedly ignored and left to tag behind the others like a lost dog as they did a walk hustle to the dining lounge that was situated on the second-tier balcony overlooking the atrium. Piper was the last to arrive and found Nurse Toll waiting for her. Nurse Toll, as Piper was soon to discover, was in charge of the day-to-day operations and the general health and well-being of the residents of the 13th level. McLeod Piper, Nurse Toll snapped, flickering open a clipboard and pen. He was a Mack truck of a man who had, in a past life, had been a pro football player with a reputation for a mean tackle that earned him the nickname Bone Grinder. That'd be me, Piper smiled. That's me what? He growled back. That's me. My name is Piper. My name is Piper, sir, he corrected. Sir, Piper echoed, rattled. Nurse Toll quickly checked off several lines on a form. I'm Nurse Toll, and you're late, McLeod. Nurse Toll glared at Piper as though she had purposely made herself late. I'm sorry, Piper mumbled. Sir, don't let it happen again. Nurse Toll shut his clipboard with a bang. I'll let you off with a warning this time. We run a tight ship around here, and we have a zero-tolerance policy with rule breakers. Understand me? Yes, Nurse Toll, sir. Nurse Toll towered over Piper and leaned down close. I've got my eye on you, McLeod. Remember that. Now follow me. Nurse Toll strode to the other side of the table, coming to a stop by an empty chair. The rest of the class was already seated and waiting impatiently to begin eating. Seating is assigned. This is your seat. Do not sit in anyone else's seat. Do not eat anyone else's food, ever. Do you hear me? Nurse Toll spoke impossibly loud, making it unthinkable that anyone currently breathing in the entire 13th level would not hear him. Piper nodded. I can't hear you, McLeod. Yes, sir. Nurse Toll, sir. Good. Later this week, I will schedule a time for you to complete a full diet. I will schedule a time for you to complete a full diet and food preference profile with your chef. Your meals will then be specifically tailored for you and you alone. Until then, you will eat what is served to you. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. Piper saw that each meal on the table was completely different. On her plate were 2 slabs of fresh sourdough bread with thick slices of American cheddar, lettuce, and tomato, drenched in a tangy sauce, which was artfully arranged next to an herb-encrusted sweet potato, chips, and a juicy pickle. To top it off, a delicious slice of hot apple pie fresh from the oven was waiting for her dessert. Sit. Piper sat. As soon as Nurse Toll was seated at the head of the table and Professor Mumblebee at the foot, the kids hungrily dug into their scrumptious food. It became immediately clear to Piper why mealtimes were such a high point at the facility. She had never tasted food quite so good in all her life. There must have been 5 different flavors she'd never experienced before in her first bite alone, and every part of her mouth sat up and sang. Reaching for a drink, Piper was startled when her glass of water slid 2 inches to her right and away from her hand. Adjusting her reach, Piper grasped for it a second time, only to have the water glass slide into the center of the table. For a moment, Piper just looked at the glass in amazement. The drink was ordinary enough, plain water, not sparkling, no ice, no lemon. A muffled giggle was quickly swallowed, tipping Piper off to the fact that a prank was being played on her. Somehow someone had rigged her water glass to have a mind of its own. Looking about, Piper saw soon saw that every single kid at the table knew precisely what was going on, while pretending to be utterly disinterested. She had to hand it to her classmates. They were shockingly good at playing a possum. This wasn't the first time the water glass prank had been played. It was a choice device to quickly gauge what a new kid was made of. For some newbies, a problematic water glass was enough to push them over the edge after a trying day. One kid started babbling incoherently. Another started banging his fists on the table in uncontrollable rage, while yet another kid laughed hysterically and was unable to calm himself without medical assistance. The jury was still out on Piper, making her an excellent victim. For her own part, Piper was darned if she was going to be bested by a wily water glass. Two could play at this game, she decided. Her first strategy was to pretend like nothing was at all wrong or unusual. She took a large bite out of her sandwich, chewing it thoughtfully, and then loudly sucked some lettuce out of her front teeth. Not once did she look at the water glass. In fact, as far as she was concerned, it didn't exist. Mmm, she smiled at the kids next to her. Right on schedule, the water glass began sliding back toward her. At first, it came only a few inches, but when Piper didn't take the bait, it moved closer and closer. Meanwhile, Piper carefully sized up the possible suspects. She quickly eliminated the kids at the far end of the table because they were too far away to be so precise with the glass's movements. That left three possibilities: Smitty, Kimber, and the sweetest, most innocent-looking girl sitting directly across from her, Lily Yakimoto. By her des- by her own design, Lily was more china doll than girl. She artfully employed a luxurious cream ribbon about her long, shiny black hair to perfectly frame her heart-shaped face and accentuate her red button mouth. When required, she opened her golden brown eyes wide and tilted her tiny chin just so, to become the picture of innocence and sweetness, a proven pose to break any adult's heart within a 1 mile radius and thus achieve any desired means. Now 6 years old, Lily had all but perfected her doll facade. Indeed, she would settle for nothing short of a delicate ivory silk, sent for at great expense from Paris, for her uniform dress, having loudly proclaimed, "You can't be serious! I'll walk around naked before a cotton blend will ever touch my skin." It was only in quiet moments when Lily thought she was alone and unwatched that one might spy her practiced demeanor accidentally slide from her features and glimpse the spirit of a wild tiger wrestling itself free. It would only last for a moment, of course, before Lily would banish it to the dark shadows of her person. It was a testament of her amazing self-control that the wildness lurking beneath her placid surface was so skillfully contained and hidden. While Lily's innocent veneer easily fooled Piper, Lily's baby finger did not. The more Piper ignored the glass, the more Lily's pinky finger moved back and forth in the exact same timing as the glass. Gotcha. Despite all appearances to the contrary, Lily was at the helm of this naughty trick, and once Piper figured that out, the rest was easy. Biding her time, Piper waited until the precise moment. Suddenly Piper lunged forward, making a wild grab for the glass. As Piper expected, Lily jerked the glass backward out of her grasp, and because of its position, the glass neatly collided with the plate, which in turn smashed into the glass of water in front of Lily. The glass was pushed into Lily's lap, drenching her precious ivory silk dress. Lily yelped as ice-cold water hit her skin. "Yakimoto, what are you doing at my table?" Nurse Toll barked. Lily tilted her chin and opened her eyes wide. "I accidentally dropped my glass, Nurse Toll." "Well, clean it up." Nurse Toll hated any disturbance or anything out of the usual. If it wasn't on his schedule, it shouldn't be happening. Then go have your dress seen to do the next thing. So go. Then go have your dress seen to, or the next thing I know, I'll be dealing with sniffles. "Yes, Nurse Toll." Lily got to her feet, and when her eyes met Piper's, she simply nodded her head in acknowledgement of a worthy opponent. The rest of the kids were impressed too. No one had ever done that before. Piper silently enjoyed her small victory and treated herself to a generous mouthful of apple pie as Conrad swaggered into the room. Claiming his seat, he eyed Piper with a knowing smile. Piper wondered if Bella wasn't close behind him. After all, Conrad had escorted Bella, so it would seem logical that they would return at the same time. Minutes passed, and there was still no sign of Bella. No one else seemed to be taking any notice but Piper. But Piper continued to glance about for her new friend when it caught her eye. She was so startled, so surprised by it, that she rose to her feet and didn't move for a long time. Dang! Look at that rainbow! Piper finally shouted, accidentally spewing bits of apple pie from her overstuffed mouth. All quickly turned and saw exactly what Piper exclaimed, a rainbow. And not just any rainbow, but the brightest, most glowing stream of colors stretched out across the atrium, not more than 20 feet away from them. It glimmered above the fountain, each color of the spectrum proudly shining forth, as clear as a bell. An instant later, a stampede of feet charged the balcony railing, accompanied by loud exclamations of, "She's right! Look! It's a rainbow! The colors are so bright! Is there a pot of gold?" There wasn't a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but there was Bella, twirling about in her bright yellow dress. Her long golden hair spun about her as she danced across the atrium below her rainbow. "It's Bella!" Dancing to the fountain, she splashed her hands into the water, and immediately streams of pink, blue, and green water began flowing from the spigots. "Awesome!" Daisy cheered. Bella whirled to a large potted ficus. Placing her arms around its trunk, the colors shot upward toward its leaves into a colored fire display. From gold to red to orange to silver, the tree was caught in a color storm. "Bella's a real live color artist!" Piper was gobsmacked. Actually, to be precise, Bella is igniting a mutation at the molecular level in an object she comes into physical contact with. The byproduct of the mutation is a temporary color transmutation. But yes, you are somewhat correct. Bella is a real live color artist. Good of you to point that out. Good of you to point out the obvious. It might have slipped our notice, Conrad Riley remarked. As always, he stood apart from the others. "Go, Bella! Go, Bella!" Kimber applauded. Others soon began to chime in. "Go, Bella! Go, Bella!" Bella's twirling reached a frenetic pace, splashes of color erupting on everything she touched, when suddenly she stopped dead in her tracks, swayed dizzily, looking up to her classmates on the balcony above her. Bewildered eyes were unfocused, as if she completely lost touch and was waking from a dream. It was only then that Piper noticed the tears streaming down her face. Others noticed too, and the cheering died. "Bella's crying!" Violet was aghast. Smitty was equally perplexed. Didn't think her DNA'd allow for anything but a smile. Nurse Toll rushed out below and quickly came to Bella's side. In a daze, Bella allowed him to lead her away without protest. Just before she disappeared into a corridor, she stumbled, swayed dangerously, and then collapsed. Nurse Toll caught her before she fell to the floor and scooped her up as though she weighed no more than a piece of paper. A moment later, they were gone. Piper wanted to run to Bella's side, but Professor Mumblebee was already herding the children back to the table. "This is mealtime. Come, come, children, you will eat now." "You did this, Conrad," Kimber hissed. Conrad shrugged. "Back to the table now." Professor Mumblebee's patience was at an end. Kimber stalked away and Smitty followed. But, but Professor, Bella didn't look good. Piper held onto the railing, wondering how to get at her. "That is why Nurse Toll is with her. We will leave her be. No?" "Can I help?" Piper pleaded. "To the table, Miss McLeod." Finally, Piper tore her eyes away and returned to her seat. Conrad remained at the railing the longest, and when at last he did take his seat, he didn't touch his food. End of chapter 8. Chapter 9. "Lily's telekinetic," Violet whispered softly. Piper was seated next to Violet in the art room, where the class, after all the excitement of the afternoon, was finally quietly occupied with basket weaving. Violet's voice was so soft that Piper didn't realize that she was being spoken to. "Telekinesis means you can move stuff with your mind. Lily does that thing with the water glass to the kids all the time." Violet never took her eyes off from her task. "You talking to me?" With the exception of Bella, the only thing Piper had gotten from the kids up to this point was a hard time. "Shh!" Violet looked away nervously. It was rare that anyone actually caught a glimpse of Violet's eyes, which were filled with a saintly compassion, so deep that she was liable to shrink or grow in response to the emotional states of people around her. Her ever-changing size caused her no end of embarrassment, and in a futile attempt to mitigate her situation, she averted her gaze at all times, hid behind her dark complexion, and spoke with a voice softer than a gentle breeze. "I'm Violet. Keep your eyes down and don't look at me." Piper did as Violet asked, and after a moment Violet started talking again in the same soft way. "That kid in front of you is Smitty. He's got X-ray eyes, and he can see through anything, even steel. If he looks at your dress too long, he's checking out your underwear, and you should belt him. And hard, too. The big girl over there is Daisy. She's the strongest person alive. Shake her hand and she'd break all your fingers, and all the bones in your arms, too. Without meaning to. Don't worry, though. Not all of us do big, scary things like them. See the kid over there? The small thing? Violet nodded, her head in the direction of Jasper. The little fella? Voice down. Don't attract attention, Violet warned. Piper put her eyes back on her basket and listened more closely. That's Jasper. He's the youngest. No one knows exactly what he can do. Story goes that when he came here, Noose Toll yelled at him so bad he forgot. Piper looked at Jasper in amazement. She'd sure love to solve that mystery. What about him? Piper nodded at Conrad. Shh! Violet's fingers accidentally snapped the twig she was twisting into place on her basket, and Piper couldn't help but marvel at the fact that she also shrank several inches. That's Conrad. Don't look at him and don't talk to him. He's trouble. Big trouble. Just stay as far away from him as you can. Conrad runs this place, always has. He's a genius, but more than a genius. They say he's 15 times smarter than Einstein. He's so smart they're all afraid of him, even Nurse Toll. Conrad's mean and he does bad things, terrible things. What sort of terrible things? Piper's mouth hung open as she looked from Violet to Conrad. Things that'll hurt you. Violet met Piper's eyes for the first time, and Piper saw fear in her face. Was it him who did something to Bella? Violet shrugged and shrank several inches more. You reckon Bella will be all right? Piper persisted. You don't even know what you don't know yet, and I can tell you're the sort of girl who will go and get herself into trouble, get herself hurt like Bella. Violet shook her head sadly. We have rules down here, and if you don't know them or follow them, you'll pay the price. Rule number 1, don't mess with Conrad, and if you value your health, you'll learn it fast. But Bella, listen to me. You've got to get Bella out of your head. There's nothing we can do for her now. Piper wanted to argue with Violet, but Violet turned to her basket again and didn't say another word. Professor Mumblebee? Conrad raised his hand politely. The glue is all gone. He held up the glue container and turned it over to demonstrate its emptiness. Yeah, we're out too, chimed in the Mustafa twins. Professor Mumblebee sighed. The art room was on the 3rd tier of the 13th level, facing the atrium. The supply closet was on the 1st tier, about as far away as it could possibly be. He'd specifically arranged for double the necessary supplies to prevent just such a predicament. I see, Professor Mumblebee irritably got to his feet. You will all behave until my return. He fixed a few of the students with a pointed look. Conrad shifted the 20 stolen glue bottles that he'd hoarded on his desk and waited long enough for Professor Mumblebee's footsteps to quieten the hall. Haughtily rising to his feet, Conrad assumed command of the classroom. Jasper, what do you have there? He sauntered through the rows, stopping at Jasper's desk, where the already tiny boy vainly attempted to make himself even smaller. This doesn't look like a basket to me. Conrad snatched up Jasper's half-finished basket and swung it back and forth at eye level in front of Jasper. Are you trying to pass this piece of rubbish off as art? You think we're stupid? You think I'm stupid? Strangled whimpers started to emerge from Jasper's throat. By this point, Nayland and Ahmed were flanking Conrad. They enjoyed a good fight and loved it when Conrad stirred up a bit of trouble. Say what, Jasper? What did you say? Conrad leaned in closer to Jasper, as though he could hear Jasper saying something. You think I'm wrong? You think your basket is good? Piper's agony at being forced to witness the spectacle of a small child being picked on by someone twice his size quickly morphed into a furious rage. Fidgeting in her seat on the verge of exploding, Piper's forearm was abruptly seized by the steadying hand of Violet. Don't do anything, Piper. Sit down. Don't look at them. But he's bullying! That ain't right! It's not your business. You can't do anything about it anyway. Conrad started bashing Jasper's basket violently against the desk, and Jasper burst into sobs. A second later, Piper could stomach it no longer and jerked her arm out of Violet's hold. She leapt to her feet. Hey, Conrad, you let him be, Piper yelled. Didn't anyone ever tell you it ain't right to bully? Why don't you pick on someone your own size? Violet sighed in the way you do when you know something bad is going to happen, but hope against hope that it won't. But it does anyway, and you realize that you always knew it would, and were stupid for having made yourself believe that you could stop it. Piper came to the other side of Jasper's desk and confronted Conrad head on, her eyes blazing. Get back his basket to him. Conrad smiled like a cat that just swallowed a canary. I'm sorry, what did you say? Get back his basket? Are you speaking English or is that some primitive grunting language? Oonga boonga. Maybe if you could actually communicate like a human being and not a hayseed, I'd return the basket. Piper shook with rage. You know what I mean. It ain't yours, and you're bigger than him besides. Now give it back. You're confused, new girl. It's clear you need guidance on exactly how things work around here. Nayland and Ahmed sneered and nodded their heads. The rest of the class waited with bated breath. Don't need no one telling me the difference between what's right and wrong, especially the likes of you. And I know a bully when I see one. And that basket you're holding doesn't belong to you. Now get it back. Piper seethed. Now, she yelled. Conrad smirked. Shucks, seeing as you puts it that way, I'm guessing I'd best do as you says. Conrad held the basket out at arm's length in front of Jasper. Well, what are you waiting for, Jasper? Here it is. Take it. Jasper looked to Piper for guidance, and she nodded for him to take it. Terrified out of his mind, Jasper reached out one thin, shaking arm. All watched, all watched the slow journey of his lone hand until it finally arrived at the basket, and tentatively moved to grasp the handle. At that very second, right before his fingers could touch the wood, Conrad suddenly snapped the basket back, flung it around, and tossed it across the room. Professor Mumblebee had opened one of the windows, but the basket avoided falling to the atrium floor by a mere 3 inches, and instead got caught on the rail above the window, which hung some 13 feet above the classroom floor. You stinking piece of cow poo! Be that as it may, there it is, Piper. If you'd like Jasper to have his basket back, I invite you to retrieve it at your earliest convenience. Piper nodded to the basket on the rail, challengingly. Allow me to rephrase that so that you can understand. Go fetch, girl. Go on now, fetch! Yee-haw! Piper was fit to be tied. Don't think I won't. Don't think? What I think is that you are a stupid hick who doesn't know a basket from a brick, and if there's any thinking to be done around here, I'll be the one doing it. Conrad moved around the desk and came face to face with Piper. Your fancy words don't fool me. All that thinking that goes on in your head don't make you smart, or didn't anyone tell you that yet? Piper stepped around Conrad and marched across the classroom to the window. Instantly, the class abounded their seats and crowded around Piper as she climbed atop a desk located directly beneath the basket. Reaching to her full height, she was still well below her goal of reaching Jasper's basket. Ahmed and Nayland snickered knowingly. Undaunted, Piper stacked a chair atop the desk and climbed both the desk and then the chair, carefully rising to her full height, only to discover that once again the basket was still out of reach. The kids murmured in anticipation as they watched Piper stack a second chair atop the desk and, with precarious movements, climb all three. Several times Piper lost her balance, and Conrad, with gleeful anticipation, expected her to fall, while the other children gasped in horror. Smitty leaned over to Kimber, speaking out of the side of his mouth. "4 bucks says her tailbone gets an introduction to the floor. Make it 10. You're on, Sparky." At her full height, above 2 chairs and one desk, Piper reached and her fingers fluttered a mere 2 inches beneath the basket. Her feet were stretched upwards, and she balanced on the very tips of her toes, but could go no further. The chair swayed dangerously. "Careful, Piper," Violet urged. Billy watched through her fingers. Piper knew that Conrad was already smugly anticipating her empty-handed descent. "Thinks he's so smart, but he doesn't know anything. I'll be darned if he gets the best of me." She was going to do whatever it took to get Jasper's basket back to him and show Conrad a thing or two. Piper closed her eyes and silently said the words. Because the rest of the class was closely gathered at the foot of the desk, Piper was standing on. They weren't able to see what was happening above them. It was Conrad haughtily leaning off to the side who saw everything. Like everyone else who saw it for the first time, it took his breath away. Piper flew. Not much, just those 2 inches, and then she grabbed the basket and got her feet right back onto the chair. Conrad was shocked and surprised. Novel emotions for a genius for whom the unexpected was often anticipated with unerring accuracy. Its facial muscles registered nothing of the electromagnetic firestorm of the cognitive excitement that was instantly sparked inside his brain. In short order, meaning in less than 2 or 3 seconds tops, Conrad processed Piper's capacity to fly, generated and then reviewed all options, selected a course of action, and calculated its success to a 2% plus or minus degree. Thus accomplished, Conrad confidently set forth. Piper turned triumphantly to the class, holding the basket like a trophy above her head. "She did it!" Kimber shouted, excited to have won the bet with Smitty. Except for Nayland and Ahmed, the others gave out various cheers and excited gasps, especially Violet. Piper gently dropped the basket onto Jasper's grateful little hands, and he smiled nervously up at her and blushed in appreciation. "Looks like you owe someone an apology," Piper grinned, noticing that Conrad's face kept a stony calm as the kids turned to him. He had been the undisputed class leader for so long, it was both sacrilegious and exhilarating to have him challenged. "You mean apologize to Jasper?" Conrad started forward, and the children parted to allow him a path to the desk. "Perhaps you're right. An apology is in order, but not to Jasper, to you." "Me?" "Yes, you." Conrad reached the desk. "For the record, I'm very sorry. Perhaps one day you'll know exactly how much." With that, Conrad reached forward and gently touched the edge of the bottom chair upon which Piper was delicately balanced. It was the exact amount of pressure placed at precisely the point required, as Conrad well knew, to send Piper toppling in only one direction. "Whoa!" Piper flailed, her arms swinging. "Watch out!" Violet squeaked. Piper swayed, first left, then right, then left again, and then, to the surprise of all gathered, except Conrad, at last fell backward, arms swinging like a windmill, out the open window, directly behind her. A second later she was gone. Silence. Not a child moved. So shocked were they by the outcome of events. The classroom was 3 floors above the atrium floor, a fall that would have killed any one of them. Kimber's face went bright red. Violet's face went white, and she forgot herself, and all the rows completely turned on Conrad furiously. "You killed her! You killed her!" Conrad sauntered away unperturbed. "You think?" Still none of the other kids moved, and absolutely no one went to the window to look out, for fear of what terrible sight might be waiting for them on the hard stone of the atrium floor. Jasper, being the youngest and most fragile, began to cry. "She's dead," Lily whimpered, and they all believed it to be true, except one. Then, suddenly, Piper shot upward, soaring through the air. "Ha! I told you! I told you you ain't none too smart, Conrad, or else you'd know well and good that you can't keep a good girl down." Conrad snorted and rolled his eyes. Everyone else was rendered mute with astonishment. "She can fly!" Violet almost fainted with relief. "She's all right because she can fly!" "Man, would you look at her fly!" Smitty clapped his hands together. The cheer that rose was deafening. Daisy pounded the floor, and her strength was so great the very room shook. Myrtle began clapping her hands together so fast it sounded as though she was an entire stadium of fans, and the others just cheered. "She can fly! I wish I could do that. I knew she was psychic." Piper smirked at Conrad and performed a few twirls and loops for his benefit, and to rub it in a little bit too. "How do you like them apples, Conrad?" "I like them just fine. Please carry on." Turning his back, he returned to his seat and casually sat down. "Do another twirl, Piper," Lily called out, clapping. "And go faster," Kimber prompted. The kids hung out the windows, rapidly cheering Piper's every move, and Piper couldn't have been more thrilled. Not only did they accept her flying, they welcomed it. Truly, she had finally found a home. She completed a complicated twist-loop combination in sheer pleasure. So great was the excitement and distraction that no one heard Professor Mumblebee's approaching footsteps, nor see him stop dead at the threshold of the class and gasp, except, of course, Conrad. "What is going on here?" he roared. Kids scattered like buckshot, clearly exposing Piper outside the window. Piper froze in midair, a deer in the crosshairs. "Piper McCloud, you are breaking the rules." End of chapter 9. Woohoo! We did it! Yes. Things are getting crazy. But yes, we finally met my favorite character, Conrad. He's a little jerk, but I love him a lot. Those are the best characters, am I right? But yeah. So, yep, tomorrow, plan is we'll read another 3 chapters and see what happens next. Hey, Emma, welcome! It's okay. Y'all can catch up later. But yes, good boy, bad boy, but good boy. I don't want to spoil anything. Anyway, I'll leave you. God, not always nice, Red. You're right. But yes, I think I'll call it a day, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.